Alcoholics Anonymous, taking the 12 steps. This is a presentation workshop. This is how I was taken through the 12 steps. My name is Dave. In this presentation, our agenda will be to have an introduction to the AA Big Book. It will discuss permanent recovery and how they used to do it. And are you ready to take the 12 steps? Then, of course, we'll go through all 12 steps together. And then we'll have closing remarks and Q&A. Of course, you can ask questions all along the way anyhow. Okay, let's get started. This is a brief introduction to the AA Big Book and how it was presented to me. All right, so the book titled Alcoholics Anonymous. On the cover, it says, this is the 4th edition of the Big Book, the basic text for Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, what do you do with the textbook? You study. All right, so the cover page on the inside, it says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And when you look up the word recovered, that means restored to health, natural health and balance. And then in our preface, it says, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Permanent recovery. It's on page xvii in the front portion of the Big Book. It is also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. Yes, that's what the Big Book says. I was sponsored by a fellow named Joe G. And he said this is how they used to do it. It's an example of how Dr. Bob sponsored somebody. It's in a story. We're not going to read the whole story, but we're going to read a little bit from pages 262 and 263 in the story He Sold Himself Short. And this is in your 4th edition Big Book. Then and only then, after a thorough indoctrination by 8 or 9 individuals, was I allowed to attend my first meeting. This first meeting was held in the living room of a home and was led by Bill D., the first man that Bill W. and Dr. Bob had worked with successfully. The meeting consisted of perhaps 8 or 9 alcoholics and 7 or 8 wives. It was different from meetings now held. The big AA book had not been written, and there was no literature except various religious pamphlets. The program was carried on entirely by word of mouth. The meeting lasted an hour and closed with the Lord's Prayer. After it was closed, we all retired to the kitchen and had coffee and donuts and more discussion until the small hours of the morning. I was terribly impressed by this meeting and the quality of happiness these men displayed, despite their lack of material means. In this small group during the Depression, there was no one who was not hard up. I stayed in Akron 2 or 3 weeks on my initial trip, trying to absorb as much of the program and philosophy as possible. I spent a great deal of time with Dr. Bob, whenever he had time to spare, and in the homes of 2 or 3 other people, trying to see how the family lived the program. Every evening we would meet at the home of one of the members and have coffee and donuts and spend a social evening. Notice this was at the end of 2 or 3 weeks of his initial trip. This is a continuation. The day before I was due to go back to Chicago. It was Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me to the office, and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time. The 6 steps were: complete deflation, 2, dependence and guidance from a higher power, 3, moral inventory, 4, confession, 5, restitution, 6, continued work with other alcoholics. Dr. Bob led me through all of these steps. At the moral inventory, he brought up several of my bad personality traits or character defects such as selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, and resentments. We went over these at great length, and then he finally asked me if I wanted these defects of character removed. When I said yes, we both knelt at his desk and prayed, each of us asking to have these defects taken away. This picture is still vivid. If I live to be 100, it will always stand out in my mind. It was very impressive, and I wish that every AA could have the benefit of this type of sponsorship today. Dr. Bob always emphasized the religious angle very strongly, and I think it helped. I know it helped me. Dr. Bob then led me through the restitution step, in which I made a list of all persons I had harmed and worked out the ways and means of slowly making restitution. Okay, so we look at this. Again, it was at the end of 3 weeks, and Dr. Bob formally took this person through the 6-step program as it was at that time. But now there's 12 steps. Everything has been expanded and a little bit more defined. Back then, it was in their primary stages, but now you could see the 12 steps inside these 6 steps. All right, and then notice Dr. Bob was leading this person through all of these steps, and he was pointing out character defects, the selfishness, conceit, jealousy, care. There's a whole list of them. Okay, so I want you to remember that for later on. And then, it talks about, the religious angle. Okay, so some people are going to say, well, we're not affiliated with any religious organizations, and we're not. But he definitely encouraged that type of thing. And then also Bob led this person through the restitution step. Okay, so it's important to see this stuff. We don't just work this stuff out on our own. And so, okay. How about you? Are you ready? On page 58 of our big book, it says, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. To what lengths are you willing to go? Send your answer to this question to my email, aabeginnersgroup@gmail.com, or send me a text at 313-551-9453. And also tell me a little bit about yourself, and I will send you a link to the next portion. Tips and takeaways. While we are working through this, read the first 164 pages of your big book. I have it on cassette. It only takes 8 hours to read the first 164 pages. That's if you're determined. All right. It's a good idea to highlight your big book with this presentation. I usually put yellow highlighter for instructions, pink for the words I haven't read. These are words to look up in the dictionary. Blue for any prayers. Green for any aha moments that you might have. And so these are all just suggestions, but they'll be helpful later on. I have a specific book just like this. It only has this information highlighted in it. I have other books where there's other things that are highlighted, but for the process of going through the steps, this is what I do. So follow through with all 12 steps consecutively. Don't take a break. Move on to the next one right away. You're supposed to just keep moving. It was in a formal setting, like Dr. Bob was sharing with that one person in 3 or 4 hours. Well, it takes a little bit longer now, but you want to go through the whole process. So it typically takes about 6 or 7 hours to complete this workshop. I do it virtually on Zoom, and you can look at the website on the next page. I'll go ahead and go to the next screen. So thank you. My name is Dave C. There's my phone number, 313-551-9453. This is AA Beginners Group at gmail.com. That's the email in case you want to correspond that way. And here's the website, www.aabeginners.com. And there I have the whole process on the website, and it's primarily for taking people through the steps. All right, and once we're all done, you should be able to do the same thing. You can take other people through. All right, so that's the point we want to get you to. But all right, so I'll be looking for that information. To what lengths are you willing to go to get it? And tell me a little bit about yourself in either a text message or in an email to the AA Beginners Group at Gmail. Okay, talk to you later.